Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Afro American newspaper, Afro American Media Company's weekly show, The Chicken Box. Yes, that is with two X's, and so glad to have you this afternoon. If our other co-host Kevin Peck were here, he would say, "Smile." That's one thing somebody can take away from you. So smile. It's noon Eastern time. It may be a different time in wherever you are. And we are so happy that you've joined us this afternoon. Hi, I'm Frances Tony Draper, CEO of the nearly 130-year-old Afro-American newspapers. And with me is my co-host. Now, this is a or intergenerational kind of show. And we also want to hear your voices. And so I'm representing for the boomers. I say I am a boomer millennial, Courtney. And so Courtney, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Courtney Alexander. I am the digital marketing editor. It is a blessing to be here this morning or this afternoon, and I am representing Gen Z.
Welcome, Courtney. It is afternoon someplace and maybe evening someplace else. But the Chicken Box, if you are just joining us, is a place where you speak your truth. And our slogan is don't be a chicken, get on the box. And so this is not one of those Facebook Lives where we'll say, sit back, relax, listen to a couple seconds, come. No, no. We want you to participate with us. So put your comments in the chat, put your name in the chat. Let us know that you're with us on this afternoon. Share this broadcast with someone else. Like this broadcast, and we would greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. So, listen, the next 3 weeks, we're going to be focusing on the Afro legacy, which we believe is every Black person in America and beyond's legacy. And we're going to talk about that as the Afro leads up to our 130th birthday bash, birthday celebration on August the 13th. And I'll give a little bit of a history. We're waiting for an exciting guest to join us. So, for this week and the next couple of weeks, we're going to be featuring journalists and others that have worked with the Afro and other members of the Black press over this last century or so. And we also are interested in case I forget to say this, Courtney, we're interested in our listeners, our viewers' stories. And so if you are an Afro reader, you were an Afro paper person, paper boy, paper girl, if you are just a fan of the Afro or you've interacted with us in any kind of way, maybe you were a clean block captain, right? Whatever it is, I don't think it's too late. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but we want you to send your photo, a good, clear photo, and just a couple of sentences that say something to the effect of, I worked at the Afro from 2001 to 2001 to 2003, and I was and fill in the blank, or whatever you like to say. Or when I was growing up, we hear a lot of, Courtney, we hear a lot of when I was growing up stories. When I was growing up, my block was in clean block. I was in the whatever 100 block, and we're in Baltimore. We also had clean block in Washington. And so that's what we would like for you to do. Send it to, and we'll put it in the chat. Send it to editor@afro.com. Editor@afro.com. So speaking of editors, we have one of our former long-term editors who's joining us this afternoon, and we'd like to welcome you back to the Chicken Box. I think you've
Welcome.
been on the box before. Hey there, Sean Yoes. How are you?
Hi, Mrs. Draper. How are you doing?
I'm well. I want you to meet Courtney Alexander.
Hi, Courtney. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm feeling good. Feeling good.
Courtney's on our digital solutions team, and so she does a lot with our digital properties. And so we're glad to have you, Sean. Haven't seen you in a while. Rather, I pray that you have been well.
I have. I've been. I've been pretty well. I've been doing good. I know y'all been doing good. So you know.
Yeah, we've been doing very, very well. And for these next couple of weeks, we're focusing on Afro legacy, and you certainly are an important part of that legacy. For those who keep up with such things, the Afro is the third oldest business of any kind in the entire United States. And so there's a list, you can Google it. It's not our list, somebody else compiled the list. And interesting, in the top three are two Black newspapers. The Philadelphia Tribune, which was founded in 1884, is number two. There is a company out of Ohio that's number one, and we are number three. But we're the oldest family-run Black newspaper in the country, and the oldest Black business of any kind in the country. And so over these 130 years, Sean, as you know, we've had a list of luminaries like yourself who have been at the Afro. Romare Bearden was a cartoonist. I think Frederick Douglass may have written for us in the early days, right? And so we've had just so many different people. And for some, the Afro was their stepping stone. And for others like you stayed a little longer than just at the beginning. So Sean, help our audience know a little bit more about Sean Yoes. Tell us about your Afro journey or your journalism journey or anything else that you'd want to let us know.
Well, I was there for almost all of those 130 years.
Okay.
But my journey started in 1989, and quite frankly, Ms. Draper, I talk about the Afro all the time. I talk about my experience all the time. I was, the organization I'm working with, Environmental Justice Journalism Initiative, we were teaching kids over the summer at the community school, and I told the story of Mr. Lacey was sitting next to me in the newsroom back in 1989, and I was working on a series about teen pregnancy, and I wrote and the lead of the story had to do with the Lafayette Court's housing projects. And I came in one morning, and Mr. Lacey said, "Yoes, that was a really good lead that you wrote for that story." And I almost passed out. First of all, to have Sam Lacey, who literally was a living legend, sitting next to me to pass me that compliment and to be reading my work at that point in my career. But those are the types, those stories are ubiquitous throughout the Afro history of these people, these great Americans, these great American journalists that have been part of the Afro legacy. So I talk about the Afro all the time, to students, to friends. I had another conversation with somebody that I was talking about the Afro and the great work that they've done through the history of not just the city but the country. So it's obviously an ongoing legacy, but it's one that is. I was talking about Mr. Lacey when he helped Jackie Robinson.
Right. So Sean Yoes, there may be just possibly one, two folk that are not familiar with Sam Lacey. You want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Mr. Lacey was he started off as a reporter. He didn't start off in sports. Obviously, his legacy was built as the sports editor, longtime sports editor. But he was a fantastic writer. Even before he began his journey into the world of sports, where he was literally a trailblazer. He's in the Hall of Fame.
Baseball,
the baseball, Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, because of his exploits as a sports reporter. This is the level of excellence that this man reached. So one of the highlights of his career, perhaps the highlight, was that for 2 years, he traveled around the United States along with Jackie Robinson, chronicling Jackie Robinson's ascension into the major leagues of baseball and breaking the color barrier in professional sports. That's who Sam Lacey was. And for, I believe, about 60 years, he was the Afro sports editor up until he age 99 or almost 100 years old when he finally passed. So I don't know what else to say about him.
Lacey had quite a legacy, Courtney. And I know you may have a question for Sean. Sam Lacey, Sean will tell you, came to work at 5 a.m. or so, commuted from Washington, D.C. First person in the office, not some days, every day.
Right.
When his arthritis got too bad for him to use a typewriter, he hand wrote his stories And by 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, he put in his 7 to 8 hours. His copy never had to be edited. And then he would get back in his car, because in the trunk of his car would be his golf clubs. And he would go to the golf course, having done all of his work starting at 5 in the morning. You could set your watch by Sam Lacey. And then that's what he did for all those many years. And there's a story told, Sean, I don't know, a lot of people have repeated that when he first started covering professional sports, African American journalists were not allowed in the press box.
Right.
And so Sam Lacey climbed on top of the press box to do his work, and other like-minded journalists followed his suit. And so you had all these journalists sitting on top of the press box. Now, I don't know whether that is exactly what happened, but that's the way the story is told. And so I don't know if you'd heard that one, Sean. But
It sounds about right. He actually had to, if I can tell this also, when Jackie Robinson was going to play in Sanford, Florida, which was a town that was notorious for Klan activity, the Ku Klux Klan was demonstrating out in front of the baseball stadium there. So Jackie Robinson and Mr. Lacey went to the back of the stadium and entered the stadium through a plank in the outfield fence, and that's how he got into that stadium that day, because literally the Ku Klux Klan was trying to keep him out, and Mr. Lacey was literally right by Jackie Robinson's side. So it makes sense to me that he probably would have been on top of the press box or whatever else he had to do in order to report get the story to the people.
absolutely. Courtney, you look like you're ready to ask a question. What would you like to ask our guests?
That sounds like an extraordinary story, and definitely scary times. Besides Sam Lacey, is there any person or journalist who you've met who has inspired your life?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I worked with a man named Earl Bird at the Afro, and I met him. I met him in his later years, but even towards the end, I mean, I'm a pretty good journalist, but that guy, he to be able to work with somebody who embodied that level of excellence, it was inspiring. Um, quite frankly. And he was always very generous to me personally. Um, he didn't look down on me like some young punk or anything like that. He was always very generous and very genuine in his approach, and in his assistance with me. So Earl Bird was somebody, but I mean, Bob Matthews hired me at the Afro. I mean, it's another kind of legendary figure. I worked with Tommy Stockett. These are people in the pantheon. The woman that's on this the chicken box, was my first boss. You know, these these are like legendary people that were in my midst all the time. So there's a list. I can't name all the people that I would consider like inspirational and vital to my evolution as a storyteller.
Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for that shout out as well. Listen, if you're just tuning in, this is the Afro American Newspapers live show, The Chicken Box, where we say, don't be a chicken, get on the box. The Afro is celebrating 130 years of continuous publication on August the 13th of this year. And we are celebrating in a big way. Go to afro.com. You have not gotten your gala tickets. You don't want to miss out. If you were thinking about souvenir journal ad, you have missed out on that opportunity. The souvenir journal is closed and on its way to print. If you wanted to do a shout out in the actual anniversary edition, it's not too late for that. But go to afro.com. We're going to have a great time on the 13th, John Yoes. We've got Tommy Davidson hosting, and he's also the comedian for the night, the Afro Gala. We have DJ Kid Capri as our band for the evening. And unlike some things that we go to that are formal and dressy and formal and stuffy and formal and a lot of speaking, we're gonna have a little bit of speaking probably before we eat. That way the speaking can be short and a whole lot of celebration. Okay, so we want you to come out, just have a great time and join us on August the 13th. So welcome to those who are watching, which we are glad that you are here. And so Sean, you have done amazing journalism work, and as you said in your own words, pretty good journalist. I think an excellent journalist. What would you consider some of your best work? If you had just all the work that you've done over these many years, what would you say? You know what? I'm really proud of that work.
Mm. um, I mean, I've literally written, I think, more than 1,000 stories over the years. So, um, I mean, I think the thing that sticks out for me, probably, because I am a lover of history, is the work that we did on the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. Um, you know, I worked with Professor Larry Gibson on that, and we were able to really reveal um, a part of Baltimore's history that a lot of people weren't familiar with, because Brown versus Board encompassed many legal battles, and Baltimore was at the forefront. For all of that, Baltimore was a vanguard city in the civil rights struggle in the United States and had been for a long time. And I think that we were able to shed some light on that. So I think, given the fact that I am a lover of history and a lover of Baltimore history in particular, that kind of sticks out for me, I think, of all the stories that I've worked on.
I think what sticks out for me too, Sean, and some people may not know, you wrote at least what 100. How many stories did you write on the Freddie Gray tragedy? So many that you turned it into a book.
Yeah, I mean,
Or columns, rather. They weren't
right, the
stories.
columns. Well, the columns were, the book was about life after Freddie Gray, after the uprising, obviously. But I mean, I think that points out to the fact that that was such a seminal moment in the history of the city. Um, and they were, and yeah, I wrote a lot of columns, a lot of columns. Um, yeah, I mean, Baltimore, Mrs. Draper, as you know, and as literally you have been a part of, is a very unique city, in the United States with a very unique history. And the Afro, the greatness of the Afro is that, part of the greatness of the Afro is that we we really told the story of the people, um, in a way that could never be told by any other, news source. And I don't know what else to say. We said it all. Like Jay-Z said, I said it all.
You said it all. Okay. Well, I'm hoping that those who are watching will weigh in. We see you, Byron. Thank you for joining us today. And both of our jewels, they are truly jewels. They have been long term supporters of the Chicken Box, and so hello to that. Lenora says she misses learning her new word of the week from your column, Sean. Sean will find some words that would send you to the dictionary. And so Reverend Bulware is on, Bonnie is on, and others are on, Sean as well. Sean, there's a lot of talk about the future of journalism, the future of newspapers. Now the Afros know we do a print product, and we're proud of our legacy product. But as you know, we use a lot of other mediums to get the stories out as well. What's your take on the future of journalism, and what would be your word to young people who are aspiring to enter the field that you've been in so long?
Well, I had alluded to earlier. I've been helping teach some young people about storytelling, at the community school over in Remington, and there's a couple of them that seem like they want to get into this business. And I said to them, because they had an assignment coming up where they were going to be interviewing some people in the community, and my advice to them was look for the good, you know, because I think storytelling is even more important now, given that we're operating in a society, in a country, quite frankly, that is been inundated with misinformation and disinformation. So now more than ever, that at least in my lifetime, truthful storytelling, fact-based storytelling, accurate storytelling is more important than it's ever been. So I don't want people to be dissuaded from entering into this industry. I want them to be encouraged because their voices are needed now more than ever. That's what I told those young people. I said, look for the good. Look for the good. Don't be distracted by other things. Look for the good. Work to tell the truth and to be accurate, and work at your craft. I was working with these kids on leads, the lead, how to write a lead, how to write a good lead.
Tell somebody what a lead is. So, and a lead is spelled LEDE, but tell us what a lead is.
Right. And you're right, it is LED. Because that's another story. Anyway, so the lead is the beginning of a story. Every great story, every good story has to have a good beginning, a good middle, and a good ending. And the beginning of a news story is called the lead. And the lead will, if it's done right, will answer these questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And that's what I was conveying to these young people, how to do that yesterday, as a matter of fact. And the lead was something that I excelled at as a writer. I will say that, when I was a news reporter. So yeah, that's a lead, and it's super important in the construction of a good story.
Thank you, Courtney. Anything else you want to ask Sean and Omar? Welcome to Omar too. Omar, I'll come back to you with Omar's comment. Sean, Omar said news is fairy tales, but you kind of addressed that, but we can come back to that. Courtney, anything you want to ask?
Yes, I've been curious about this. What are some of your fondest moments at the Afro?
Some of my fondest memories?
Yeah.
Too many. I mean, we used to. I mean, look. Okay. I'm not a fair person to ask because I'm biased. I'm just biased. I don't have an objective opinion about the Afro. The Afro gave me everything as far as my start as a journalist. I mean, I always say that. So, you know, we used to sit on. Okay, we used to sit on. We used to call it the porch, the front porch, and it was the front of the building back in the building when we went to Charles Street. And at the end of the day, we would sit out and, you know, we would talk and laugh. And the Afro family is literally, it's a family. It's a family. We had a man named Mr. Hunter, who on Thursdays on deadline, well, it was on Thursdays, he would come to the Afro for watermelon and cut it up, and everybody would have some watermelon with lunch. I mean, I'm not ashamed to eat watermelon. I don't know about y'all, but I'm
either.
So those are the kinds of memories that I have. But every day was a memory, because when you came in and you saw people who you considered family, it's always a great experience. To work with people that you considered family was just a great experience. So every day was a memory, really, for me, if I'm being real honest about it.
Okay, so I'm sure that you had good memories and what I call growing edge kind of memories. I want to talk a little bit about, as we not just because the Afro is celebrating 130 years, and we are, but the Black press in general is celebrating 195 years. It's been in existence 195 years since it was founded in 1827 by two gentlemen, Samuel Cornish and John Russwurm, who said, "We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us." So every now and then people say, well, why do we need the black press? We can get everything that we need from other sources. What do you say to that, Sean?
Well, what I see is I see I think the mission of the black press uh, is still as vital as it is as vital today as it was so many years ago, because we talk about the black angle of a story. Um, the mainstream media ultimately is run by people who don't look like us, who don't have our point of reference, who don't have our cultural understanding, don't have any. You cannot fully understand the black American experience, and it's a unique experience, and it's a very important experience in the American experience. Without the black experience, there is no American experience. So what I'm saying is that in order to tell the story of black people, you need black people to tell the story of black people, to fully tell, authentically tell the story of black people. And that's that. It's as plain as that. It's that simple to me. So we never, I mean, there will always be, whether or not the black press exists, which I pray it always will, whether it exists or not, as long as there are black people in America, there's always going to be a need to have that story told from that point of reference, from that point of view. Or, I mean, what group of people wants another group of people to define or to tell their story? Nobody wants that.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
just human.
Right, and the bias that's there, which reminds me, on Sunday I had, for our viewers, for our listeners, if you haven't planned to go see this, you need to put this on your bucket list before the end of August. And so Charles Randolph Wright has written a musical called The American Prophet, Frederick Douglass in His Own Words. It is a musical, but there's a scene in there, and for those who might not remember, Frederick Douglass started a paper called the North Star long before the Afro was founded. And it was a paper, as you said, Sean, about black people, for black people, by black people. But William Lloyd Garrison, the white abolitionist, who had his own paper at the time, and Frederick Douglass used to contribute to that paper, accused Douglass of trying to put his paper out of business and said, why do you need your own paper, Frederick Douglass? Can't we just continue to do what we're doing in my paper? And Frederick Douglass's response was, no, because you don't have the same perspective. I'm laser focused on what needs to happen for our people to be liberated and to be free. And so I sat there and watched that musical and enjoyed it so much. It's riveting. It's playing in the arena in DC. And listening to Frederick Douglass's words from that long ago and realizing that if you didn't know they were said in the 1800s, they could have been said in 2022. And so the American Prophet, I just say to all of our listeners, if you have, it might not be on your bucket list, but put it on your bucket list. And it's an unbelievable presentation. And so that just reinforces, Sean, what you said. There is, Omar, there is press bias. Absolutely. And so we have white newspapers now, and Sean, you may want to weigh in on this, or Courtney, who are apologizing for the way they covered black people, black issues, including the Baltimore Sun here recently put out a statement of apology to say that their reporting was just so biased. And so,
Can you imagine that after all those years, they said, I mean, to have to publish an apology,
right?
It is. I mean, first of all, it's shocking that they didn't. I never would have believed that they would have done it. But that's a lot of bad karma, I think. When it comes to their representation of the black community, and we've all known it for generations.
Yep, and it's not just them; it's been across the country.
Sure.
And So when people ask me, well, why the black press? If you want to just look at things through other people's lenses about you, then go right ahead. But most of the time, they have no clue.
Mm.
And so I was on a panel with a Sun reporter recently to talk about lynching in Maryland. It wasn't that recent; it was pre-pandemic.
Mm.
And he said that when the Baltimore Sun and others, I'm not just picking, not just calling out the Sun, they would cover a lynching of a black man from the perspective of what he, in quotes, did wrong, why he deserved, that's in quotes, to be lynched. I can't even say that. That just doesn't even sound right.
Mm.
But when you look at the Afro coverage of that same incident, the Afro was sitting at the kitchen table with the grieving mother, sharing her grief, certainly not to the same extent because that was her son, but actually finding out who he was as a person.
Can I interject?
Oh yeah, yeah, jump in. This is the Oh, this is the chicken box, by the way, Sean. For those who
Right.
are for you and for those who are watching, jump right in.
So the last official lynching in the state of Maryland, George Armwood, the Afro obviously covered it extensively, more extensively than any other news organization in the state. And it was specifically Clarence Mitchell Jr., the man known as the 101st Senator, the legendary lobbyist for the NAACP, who got his start as a reporter for the Afro, who went down to Princess Anne, and the story. I mean, he photographed Armwood's body, and we put it on the front page. That was left smoldering in a lumber yard. That's what they did to that man, and because of the Afro's coverage, that the coverage of Armwood's lynching really terrified and motivated the black community in a way that really gave some steam to the burgeoning civil rights movement that was happening in Baltimore. A young attorney named Thurgood Marshall, who had just passed the bar a few weeks earlier, was at a meeting in the office of the governor, Ritchie, at the time. And he stands up and he says, well, what is there an investigation into this lynching? A very kind of bold statement for a young man who had just passed the bar to make at that time. And so the Afro, we see the Afro right at the forefront of a story that was very, very important, especially at the beginning of the civil rights movement in Baltimore City and in the United States. So when you bring up lynching, the
Yep,
Afro was
yeah,
was right there.
we were right there. And speaking of Thurgood Marshall and my grandfather Carl Murphy, who was tapped. We're talking about Afro history today, black press and the need for and all of that. Carl Murphy, my grandfather, and Thurgood Marshall were great friends. So just 2 years ago, I think, or maybe it was last year, we found, I guess, what are those big recordings called, reel to reel or whatever? We found a big recording, and all it said on the outside was Thurgood. And
Mm.
so we had it transcribed last year. It's been sitting in our archives for who knows. It was just there.
Wow.
That's all it said. But it's Carl Murphy and Thurgood Marshall talking about the board, um, Brown versus Board of Education brief
Wow.
and the NAACP. So
Wow.
we had a transcribe. You have some little gaps because it's very, very, very old. And Thurgood Marshall says to my grandfather, he says, the boys in the press, talking about the white press, they want a comment from me. He said, my comment to them is no comment.
Hmm.
But for the Afro, I got plenty of comment. And then they go on to talk about the strategy, the NAACP strategy for getting, once this brief is, once this brief is written and they're going to court, and the strategy for getting information out. And Thurgood Marshall's asking Carl Murphy, who was not a lawyer, what do you think of the brief? And Carl Murphy says, I think it's a very fine piece of work. And they're just talking like we're talking about Brown versus Board. I mean, conversations like that, because Carl Murphy recorded everything. I don't. That's before all the laws that said you had to, ask to, to record. But I'm thinking about those kind of priceless conversations that must have taken place all over the country that
Well,
were ended up reported in the black press all over the country, and that today we only have like 230 black owned. I want to say black owned. We have black led, we have black focused, we have black leaning media outlets, but there are only 230 African American owned publications in the country. That may sound like a lot, but it absolutely is minuscule compared to the news landscape across the country. That's on the black newspaper front. We have some digital properties, Afro's digital as well. We have some of those, but for the legacy, we don't have for 230. Courtney, what else would you like for because we have a little bit more time for Sean to speak on, because he's a wealth of knowledge. He has a lot that he can share.
So I do have a question for Sean. Stemming from that discussion, do you think that non-Black news organizations still lack diversity and inclusiveness?
Well, I mean, some have worked for diversity, and kudos to them. I'm not saying that that it is that a non-Black organization, or a mainstream quote unquote organization can't cover Black issues. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that I think to get the full story, of the Black American experience, I believe the Black press has stood head and shoulders above all other news platforms in being able to deliver that. Because when you say the full story, typically a mainstream organization covers sensational stories about Black people, a murder, political corruption, whatever. We've always told the whole story, from political corruption to the Little League baseball team that's going to the National World Series, to the young mother the young woman who was accepted at 200 different universities across the country, including Harvard. I mean, we've always told the entire story of Black people, and there's not going to be a mainstream news organization that dedicates that much time and energy to telling the entire story. So yes, you're going to have people at mainstream publications or platforms that tell Black stories, and some of them, I suspect, tell those stories well. But you will never get a mainstream organization that will tell the full story, the full authentic story of Black people like the Black press does. That's my thought.
And that is so true. And if they're a general audience, mainstream publication, news outlet, television station, whatever, the truth of the matter is they're trying to appeal to a whole different audience and trying to be a little wider. We are appealing to a big audience as well, and so sometimes people mistake the fact that because we're African American publication that we're only talking to Black people. We're talking to white people too. They can debate critical race theory about all. That's another whole story, right, Sean? People can debate that about whether or not should be taught in the public schools. It should be taught. Accurate Black history should be taught. And the Black press is a great source for that history. Let me stop for a minute and let me look online and see who I have not said hello to. I see Laura Phillips-Berg there. I see Renelle Lee. Thank you for joining us. I think I've already recognized Omar, Lenora, and Byron. Thank you for being on the Chicken Box on today. We pray that you'll weigh in. We're talking about Black people versus the legacy of the Black press. And in case you missed this earlier, the Afro is celebrating 130 years of its founding on the actual day of the founding on August 13th. Not the date. We were founded in 1892, 2022. And we want to give a shout out to our sponsors of that event. Sean and Courtney, we have a lot of sponsors, a lot of people. Some you see on that flyer, but they're not the only ones. So it is, yes, AARP and Johns Hopkins, a great sponsor, Baltimore Urban League, Murphy Falcon Law, Tedco, George Mason Mortgage, BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport. I'm forget somebody, Bank of America, Truist Bank, March Funeral Homes, Comcast, PNC Bank, BGE, and others to come. And so I think I got most of them, if not all of them, named. And so we're going to have this big celebration. We hope that you all who are watching will be there. You have your ticket. Go to afro.com. We're going to have a good time celebrating those who helped us come this far. We have not done it on our own. A lot of people say, oh, it's a family-owned business. At one time, it was all Murphy family. Not like that anymore. But we are glad to have such diversity in our newsroom, including young people like you, Courtney. We're glad to have Courtney there. Sean, how old were you when you started at the Afro? If you don't mind me asking, you can just give us a range in your 20s.
I'll tell you, I was 23.
You were. Courtney said, "Oh wow."
I was 23. I just turned 23, as a matter of fact. So yeah, and I was my first week there. I was on the front page. I had the lead story.
Did you? What was? Do you remember what it was?
It was Hunter bombshell still seething.
What was that? What was that about? It's funny about we're gonna talk about headlines in a minute too, Sean, because that was the kind of headline you did for print. Now everybody's into the SEOs, which Courtney's going to tell us about SEO in a minute. Go ahead, Sean. So tell us about that story. What was it about?
It was the superintendent of Baltimore City Public Schools at the time, Richard Hunter, had tried to he had begun a major reorganization of North Avenue, Baltimore City Public School headquarters. And it just, people were getting fired and people were getting forced to retire, and everybody was all up in an uproar. And Bob Matthews said, Yoes, you go down. And he gave me a list of people that he wanted me to interview, and I interviewed them. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. And that was the front page story that week. It was the lead story that week. And I stayed on the front page from that point on, it seemed like, for a long time. But yeah, that was my initiation under fire back in January of 1989.
Did you get a byline?
Yeah.
Well, because bylines weren't. I mean, now people just get bylines, but you had to earn a byline.
I earned that one.
Yeah, you earned that one. As a little sidebar. And Dr. Hunter's daughter Emily is a school principal today and a member of the Morgan State University Board of Regents. So,
okay.
Yep. So the apple didn't fall far from the tree. And so that headline, say the headline again, Sean, what was it?
Hunter bombshell still seething.
Still seething. Okay, yeah. Courtney. So in today's talking about how journalism has shifted, what would you do for an SEO headline? Tell everybody what SEO is.
So that is search engine optimization. And with that, it's a way that you can make your page easily accessible in a way where people can just search it and you can quickly find it, and you can find I guess more relevant topics, so you can narrow down your search.
So back in the day we would have those headlines like Sean has to just get your attention, and we wouldn't tell the whole story in the headline. And now you see online and even in print, you see these 2-tier, three-line headlines that you say almost tell the whole story, but it's for the search engine optimization because of the way search engines, i.e. a Google, will rank your news story and put it at the top of the feed, right? So journalism has shifted some, but still a good story is a good story.
100%.
I don't know. Yep. I don't know if anyone asked. Did we ask you, Sean, already? What advice would you give to young people today? Did we ask you that already?
Yeah, I answered that.
Yeah, you did answer. You did answer. Yeah. You did answer that. In terms of this field, would you say get into the field?
If your heart is for this field, then you should get into this field. If you are a storyteller, if you have to get your story out, if that's what's in your heart to do, yes, absolutely. I wouldn't say if you're driven by money, don't necessarily get into this field. But I'm not even saying it in a disparaging way. I'm saying get into this field if your heart is driven to get into this field. because that's the only thing that's going to sustain you, your desire to tell the people's stories. It's not about being motivated by money, at least from my perspective. It's not about being motivated by money. If you can um, create a platform and have a big revenue stream, more power to you. But my point is that if you're endeavoring to become a storyteller, you become a storyteller because it's in your heart to do it, not because you're thinking about making $1 million. I just don't see that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, hi, Dolores and Teresa. Both have joined us. I don't know that you're here unless you weigh in the chat. So glad that you are here. So, Courtney, what motivated you to get into, as a young person, to get into this field? And tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So I initially went into college as a geology major, and I decided to change my major because at the time there were a lot of racial issues going on, like social injustices, and I felt like these stories need to be told. And I have seen coverage, but I think more of us just need to tell these stories because a lot of like I mentioned, like police brutality and social injustices occur. And I really want those stories to be told and highlighted because it is essential. And I don't want Black people's stories to be forgotten. So that inspired me to become a journalist. And I am the digital marketing editor. So I pretty much handle like the social media side and the marketing side of things. But I have like done articles in the past. So I also do know how to do things from like the editorial side as well.
Okay, and so you make sure that so when you're posting on social media is a little different, but your aim is still to do what? Sounds like your aim is still to get the story out. And
Get
there are a
this.
lot of young people like you, Courtney, who are interested in the Black experience of Black history and to know what is going on in our, in our sphere, in the Black community, but also getting the news out. So, Sean, I'm gonna put you on the spot just a little bit, and then Courtney, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. What do you think are the 2 or 3 most important things that we as Black people should be talking about? And those of you who are watching on Facebook, come on, put in the chat. What do you think we should be, as journalists, as a Black newspaper? What should we be talking about? What stories should we be telling?
Oh boy, I don't know. I'm really believing that, especially in a city like Baltimore, um, we need to be focused on city issues, um, and there are a lot of them. And because I mean, all the dramatic changes that we're seeing in the country, we're seeing them in locally also. How does Baltimore respond to issues like gentrification? How do we respond to the issues of crime? Who's best to lead us through some of these challenges that we see as a city? How do we actually begin to repair the damage that has been done historically in Baltimore to the Black community? These are very important issues that not only cities like Baltimore are facing, but Black-dominated cities across the country are facing. We know that Evanston, Illinois, the Black population fought to have reparations for that city that was taken out of the sales of marijuana. I mean, that's an issue that Black communities are going to be looking at across the country. So that's what I would say. I mean, it's easy to talk about the kind of the shiny objects that are happening right now, but when I'm thinking about Black storytelling, I think about the work that the Afro has done historically, and I think it would behoove us to focus on those issues that are facing the Black community in the city now.
Thank you. What do you think, Courtney? Thanks, Sean. What do you think from your vantage point, or from, I know you can't speak for the entire generation, but what do you think?
I would say discrimination in the healthcare field. I know that Black people aren't as protected as white people, if I'm being honest. The rates that Black women have faced, like with the mortality rates with births, that is very alarming. And I think that needs to be addressed. It shouldn't be happening. It never should have happened. And I recently saw a story about how there were a group of Black women who were sterilized without their knowledge. And I had no idea that that happened. And I think that's very alarming, and that those stories should be told so it does not happen in the future. Um, Another topic we should talk about is crime, like such as police brutality. Just this morning, I saw a video on social media about a young Black boy in Oak Lawn, Illinois, not too far from me, and he was being brutalized by the police. And again, this should not be happening, and there should be more coverage on that from like all news organizations. The third thing I would say is housing discrimination. It's sad that it's still occurring now, and I think more people just need to have more knowledge on it, so we can prevent that from happening in the future.
Okay, all great topics. Dolores says we should talk about history, local issues, positive things. Sean, you said local issues that are happening in the community. We should talk about more information about how organizations are doing the work, collaborating with organizations who are doing the work. Teresa says we should talk about what's the assets. There it is in Black neighborhoods, addressing the vacants owned by Black families and the vacants owned by our municipalities. I don't have the stats on this, Sean Yoes, but in my travels, Baltimore seems to have more vacants than any large city of this kind that I've seen. Now, I've not been everywhere, but I've not seen as many vacant buildings and houses in other cities of our size.
It's extraordinary, and I mean, and believe it or not, it was worse years ago. That there were numbers I had heard that there was at one time, this was years ago, 50,000 vacants in Baltimore City. Now that number is down significantly now, but it's still very high. I mean, I think it's around 13,000, 14,000. That's the number, the official number that I hear. But when you talk about vacants, then you talk about the issue of blight. And Teresa Stevens, who just commented, she knows very well about those issues. So, yeah, it's an ongoing challenge for our city. A big challenge.
Oh yeah, it is a big city. It's a big city. It's a big city, but it's a big challenge, and it's something that those who visit our city, especially those who are coming in for the first time, that's what kind of like smacks you right in the face. If you take the train north from DC and you come in through East Baltimore, or come in, you can see out of your train window, um, you come right past downtown. You're like, okay, you know, where am I? And so those are the stories that have to be told as well. Those are the stories that have to be told as well. Well, this has been the Chicken Box. We're almost finished, and when we get to the last minute or so, not minute, minutes or so, we're going to ask each of you to jump on the box. Now, if you're from Baltimore, like Sean Yoes is, Sean Yoes is not just from Baltimore. He'll tell you he's West Baltimore.
Thank you.
That's all right. Different. I'm West Baltimore as well.
That's
Courtney
right.
is in the Chicago area. But if you're from Baltimore, you know that a chicken box is 4 wings and a fry, right? And so with a little bit of ketchup, and there's a debate about the hot sauce. But this chicken box that we're talking about is a platform that we get on and speak our truth. And so we've got just a few minutes left. And so I'm going to come to you first, Courtney, in just a couple of seconds to get on the box about any topic that you would like to speak about as it relates to the Black press, journalism, social media, whatever's on your heart. And then Sean, I'm gonna jump on the box after Courtney, and we'll leave the last words on the box to you. All right, Courtney, you are on the box.
Ooh. Once again, it is a true blessing to be here. After we had this discussion, I think that I would like to see more journalists my age coming into the field and making a difference and telling the stories that need to be told. We need to, I guess, educate more. We need to tell those untold stories, because there's a lot out there, and I feel like we just need to get it out and keep educating more generations as they come about.
Okay, you off the box?
Yes, I'm off.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna jump on the box. I'll follow up a little bit with what Courtney said. There are lots of stories to be told, and we are looking to tell stories accurately from the Black perspective. Sean will tell you, as many journalists will tell you, we need your stories. For those of you who are watching, we need your stories. We want to encourage you to record your stories for your own personal use, but also if you hear of a story that you think might be of interest to us, just send your idea to editor@afro.com. We certainly, as a paper of record, we will report the stories of the day, but we're not just looking to pick up stories that other media have told ad nauseum. We're not just a regurgitation um, publication. We also are looking for your news tips. We're looking for breaking news. We're looking for, let me just be frank about this. I don't know how else to say it. A lot of times when things are happening that are newsworthy, um, some people still think that if they go to another outlet, the ice is cold to look, and then we don't know about it. We want to know about it first, so that we can then break the news about us from that perspective that would give that flavor that only the Black press can give. And so, editor@afro.com. They're gonna love me because I'm sending all the emails to them. But that's all well and good. But we do want to know your stories, um, and we some of you write, and so, if you think, I want to write, so we want you to send the letter to the editor or send in a commentary on a topic so that we might consider your story for posting or for publication. And again, we invite you to join us on Saturday, August the 13th at Martin's Crosswinds, featuring Tommy Davidson, DJ Kid Capri. Join us and our sponsors, AARP, Johns Hopkins, University of Baltimore, Urban League, Murphy Falcon Law, Tedco, George Mason Mortgage, BWI, Thurgood Marshall, Airport, Bank of America, Truist Bank, March Funeral Homes, Comcast, PNC Bank, BGE, and others as we celebrate this 130 years. And I didn't say it at the beginning, but we celebrate the man that God gave a vision to at 52 years old with 10 children to start this publication, because he felt, even though people said less than 2% of the Black population could read, aren't y'all tired of being studied? But anyway, that he felt that we needed to have our own publication to talk about our own news from our own perspective. I am off the box. Sean Yoes, you get the final word.
Okay. So it's easy to focus on stories like political corruption or homicide, or there's a news platform in Baltimore, I would argue, delights in the pathology of Black people and the suffering of Black people. I'm not even gonna call it, because I believe most people know who they are. But ultimately, it's easy to cover those stories, and I guess for that news outlet and others, it is profitable. But I would just encourage people in our community specifically to focus on the dozens, hundreds of individuals and entities that are doing extraordinary work in our city, on the streets of Baltimore, because they exist, and lots of times they go unheralded, but they still do the work every single day. Um, I'll shout out my own organization if I'm gonna be on a chicken box, I'm gonna do that. The Environmental Justice Journalism Initiative. We're a young organization, but we're doing dynamic things. Somebody like Nika Nambi from Fight Blight Be More, Nicole Mundell from Out for Justice, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I'm not trying to slight anybody, but there are literally hundreds of people and entities that are doing extraordinary work in the city of Baltimore on behalf of poor people and Black people. And those are the stories. Those are the most important stories. People known and unknown who are holding it down for our city in very, very important ways. And again, to kind of bring it back all full circle, the Afro has been covering those stories for 130 years and will continue to cover those stories. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful to be a part of that legacy.
Well, we thank you, Sean Yoes, and thank you for the occasional writing that you do. Hope you'll do some more writing. I'd love to know more about environmental justice and what you all are doing,
Okay.
and your very deep connections with the community organizations that are on the ground. We need those stories. We welcome those stories, and so we're looking forward to continuing our partnership. Well, our time is up. And we are grateful to our guests, a former editor, Baltimore editor Sean Yoes, who is a well known journalist here in the city and beyond. Thank you for your work. Courtney Alexander, my co host, my Gen Z co host, thank you so much for being there. We miss our Gen X, your buddy Kevin, Impeccable Peck, but he'll be back next week. And so thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And as we say, don't be a chicken. Get on the box about whatever issues you know needs to be brought to the forefront. Take care until next week.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Bye bye.